Hey guys, here we are. So we're going to work on a quick winterization. And so because we use the camper through the winter, I do this several times a year. It usually only takes about 20 minutes, so I'm going to show it to you real quick. So as part of this winterizing process, you don't need much as far as tools. We have to hook the compressor up to the city water inlet, a little adapter. We have a 1 1/8 inch socket, deep socket for removing the anode rod from the hot water heater, and most importantly, Happy Camper IPA. Keep my spirits up as we go through this process. It shouldn't take more than 20 minutes to get her done, so I'll take a swig of the beer and we'll get going on it. The first step of this is dump and flush of the tanks. This camper has a strange location for this gray water tank flush, but it's right here. We'll just pull that. I'm doing everything, the fresh flush out the black really good, and we'll get the grays dumped. I don't leave water in the black like I normally do if I'm going to winterize. I will be pouring a little bit of antifreeze in from the top, through the toilet when we do the winterizing. So here we go. So this is the kitchen gray tank dumping, and runs right through there. This is here at my house where I happen to have full hookup. If you can get it in one way or another, well worth it. And that pipe right there for the dump runs around to the front where my septic tank is, and so it's just plumbed into that. Final bit of dumping everything out. This is our shower gray tank. I always run that last because it cleans out the hose with the relatively cleaner water. Is it really cleaner? Well, it still stinks, but anyway, we're dumping it out, and as soon as all the tanks are dry, not dry, but empty, then we'll start winterizing. Okay, so the first thing we do, shut off the water pump, obviously shut off the hot water heater, not sure why that guy's on, and then make sure you're not connected to the city water, so we have no input water. And what we'll do is run over here, the kitchen sink, turn it on in the middle, so we're draining the pressure off of both the hot and cold water sides, and just leave that open and drain all the pressure off on the lines. You want to do that before you do what's next, which is the hot water heater. If you don't, it's messy. Here's the hot water heater. If you don't know, and most of you do by now, this little ring, almost all of them are the same. Turn it that way, the plate comes off. When you go to put it back on, there's a couple little pins that it sits in, and then it's just that little spring clip up there that holds it. Now, the hot water heaters aren't all the same. As you can see here, I've got a Suburban, and so on my drain down here, this is an actual anode rod, and I'll show you what that looks like when we take it out. On the Atwood heaters or Dometic, whoever they are now, they just have a plastic plug in here. That's because their tank is made of a different material. But for the Suburbans, you need an anode rod to prevent corrosion. It's a sacrificial anode. So we've got our 1 1/8 inch socket attached to the anode rod in this case, or the plastic plug. I busted it loose with the wrench, and so it's already loose. Now we'll pull it. Notice that white gunk coming out? I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. I think I'd covered that in the spring. That's usually when I deal with that. But we'll just take out the anode rod. As we take this thing out of here, we get a little trickle of water. So what I do is pop the pressure relief valve up here, and as I open that, off she goes. If you don't depressurize the water system, it'll blow this rod out of your hand and shoot. It doesn't hurt anything, but you're almost guaranteed to get wet. So we'll let that bad boy drain, and we'll go from there. Time for a pause. If you ever see Santa Fe IPA or Santa Fe Brewery Happy Camper IPA, I highly recommend it. They also have a 7K IPA, which is kind of cleverly named because Santa Fe is at 7,000 feet, and so it's the 7K IPA. It's pretty good, but the Happy Camper is better. So a quick review of our current state, right? The kitchen sink is still on, both the hot and cold, so it's right in the middle, so I'm drawing off both the hot and cold side of the house. The hot water heater anode is out, and what I've done is hooked up the hose to the city water connection. As soon as I turn that on, a big burst of water shot out of the hot water heater, and I'm assuming it's spraying bubbles and whatnot inside at the kitchen sink. That's good. We're getting more water out. So before I go inside the camper, what you're looking at here is in the wheel well. This is my freshwater tank drain. I know I probably have 20-30 gallons of fresh water in there. So I'm going to go ahead and open that guy up, let that water drain out. And then while that's draining, I'm going to go inside and we're going to hunt down some other pieces we need to look at. Okay, so in our current state, there is air coming out of here. It's not a whole lot. Most of it is actually going out through the hot water heater. So let's fix that first. So we talked before how all campers are different. And I've seen campers with anywhere between 1 and 3 hot water heater bypass valves. This camper only has 1, right? And that's on the intake side of the hot water heater. Sometimes they'll have another one here on the output side, and they'll have one in the middle. This works just as well as having 3, at least as far as I can tell. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip this guy, which will bypass the hot water heater. And I don't know if you could hear it, but now we've got a lot more pressure coming out of the kitchen sink, which was expected, right? It's blowing out the hot and cold side to the kitchen sink. Now let's remember, when you hook up the air to your camper, you want to be between 30 and 45 pounds. I try not to go above 45 psi. So with the compressor that I have, what I do is I turn it down until the gauge on the compressor shows about 45, and then I'll use just a nozzle and spray some air out, and it'll drop to 30, and then when I close the air, it'll raise back up to 45-ish. I don't want to get too much over 50 pounds pushed through these lines. That's within the range of where I run my pressure regulator for water as well when we're at a campsite. So anyway, it's still running, and I'm going to run to the next step. People ask me, what do you do about getting the water out of the freshwater pump? And if you don't know, the freshwater pump on these things is, it doesn't require a solid siphon. So if you just leave it, drain the freshwater tank, which we did outside, it's drained now, turn on the water pump and just let it run. It'll pump tiny amounts of air, which will be enough to pull the water through that system. And you can hear it when I turned it on, the lines coming from the water tank up are pushing that water out of the kitchen sink right now. Yeah, it was noisy in there, but I let it run for 10-15 minutes, right? Just so you know, those water pumps, I actually left one on for about 2 weeks once when the tank was dry. So it sat there and ran for 2 weeks straight. I was 100% convinced it was defeated and destroyed, and sure enough, I just put some water in the freshwater tank and it would still work. So they are able to run dry without damaging them. So while the pump's running, emptying out its lines, the intake line from the tank up to the pump and pushing everything from the pump forward, let's look at the layout of our camper. Right, the kitchen is right up there, over there, through that window, right? So the kitchen's in the rear, and that's probably our biggest, well, that's one of our water use points, and that's what we're looking for here as we walk the length of the camper, is the water use points. Next, we have our wet bay, right, where there's an outdoor, well, they call it an outdoor shower. It's a place you can hook a hose up and get hot or cold water outside. And so we have water in the kitchen, we have water here, and directly above here is the bathroom, right? So the shower, toilet, and bathroom sink are all right there. And so that's the layout of the camper and where the different water components are. The reason I think that's important is I like to start at where I'm pushing air in, right? So the air is coming in here. So I'll start in the bathroom, open those valves, let those pump out, do the outside shower, then the bathroom, work my way back to the kitchen. And that way I'm pushing the water further and further down the line until there's none left in the unit. So this is a me thing, and it may be a little over paranoid, but I do not like to have the air hooked up. Even though I know it's only at 45 psi when there's no air flowing, I don't like to leave it hooked out without a valve open. So right now the kitchen one is still open. So what I'm going to do is hook up the hose here, get this one open, and then go close the one in the kitchen. And I always try to leave one open through this whole process. Probably overkill. I wouldn't worry too much about it if you accidentally close one, but that's the way I do it. Because we started in the kitchen, there probably won't be much water here. Let's see what we've got, right? There's our hose. The kitchen valve is still open. I haven't opened the hose here yet. I'm going to try to set you guys down right here. And let's see what happens when I turn on the cold. Not much, right? Same thing if I turn on the hot. Again, the kitchen's still open, which I don't like that. So I turn on the hot. We'll probably get some out of that because it's got to go all the way to the front and then back again. So this is the main emptying of the hot water lines when I do this one, if that makes sense. The air is going in here. It goes all the way to the front of the camper. It then goes through the hot water tank or through the hot water bypass that I showed you, and then comes back to here. So that's why we got water out on the hot side of this. So I'm going to leave that open for a minute and go turn off the kitchen, and then we'll continue. Okay, I went inside, I turned off the water pump, I turned off the kitchen sink, so this is the only valve that's open, that's the hot water valve. As you can see, it's no longer spewing water, so we'll turn that guy off, turn on the cold. See, I just broke my own rule. And turn on the cold, we're getting nothing here. And I just go piece to piece, right? So the next unit, the shower, is physically right here. That's the closest to the water base, so I'll do the shower next. And then probably the toilet and the kitchen sink, or the bathroom sink, and then do the kitchen and the low point drains. Again, I'll leave this on. I'll actually open them both, leave this on, go up, turn on the shower, both valves in the shower, come back out, turn them off out here. Probably redundant, but it makes me feel better, so I do it that way. All right, so here's the shower. I lay the shower head on the floor and just fire up the hot side, see what we get. A little bit of water coming out. Turn on the cold side and go back outside and turn off the outside shower. So we ran the hot and cold individually in the shower, right? Before I turn those off, I'm going to come over to the toilet. Let me just switch the camera around here. Easier to work with. Shower. Hot and cold are open. I did them one at a time just to make sure. No change, no more water coming out. Let's come over here to the toilet. I'll step on the pedal. While that's doing its thing, I will turn off the water over here so we get all the air through the toilet. That will not take, as you can see, we still got a little dribble coming out, but not much. We're almost done there. And I can do my acrobatics and reach over here. Turn on the cold side of this and let go of the toilet on the pedal. Let this little guy run. Cold. I usually let them run to about that point. There's still tiny amounts of water coming out, so that's not going to hurt anything, right? That's tiny. It can't fill up a pipe and get big enough to expand and break anything. And there's room to expand within the pipes because we have 99% of the water out. Switch over to the hot side, do the same thing. And there we have it. So let me show you one of my, Kyle's not a fan of the way they did it in this trailer, right? We're back in the kitchen sink. I showed you where that was. We go down through these 3 large drawers. Bottom drawer I removed, and down there are low point drains. So there's 2 of them. You can't really see them, but they are here, and so I will open them both. And so I know they're both open now, and let that happen. Go close the bathroom sink, and we'll keep. So here are the low point drains directly under where I just showed you, underneath the trailer. So last step, I'll turn on the kitchen, close the low points, let the kitchen run. There won't be anything that comes out of it, but I do it anyway. And then I'll reopen the low points, close the kitchen, let it blow for a second, and I'm done. I'll leave the low points open so that any water was accumulating in the lowest, what should be the lowest point in the camper, it'll drain out. Here's the hot side. I'll close the low points down here. Excuse me. Low points closed. A tiny bit of spray. Let that run for a minute. Flip it over to the cold side. No change. You know, we're using different plumbing now, so I think we are effectively done. I'll open those low point drains and we'll let it rip. This winterizing is hard work. One thing I almost forgot to tell you that I do, the low point drains are still open, so that's where the pressure is going right now. I want to move this over and blow air through the Santa flush. If you have a black tank flusher, you probably ought to run some water through that too. or some air through that as well. Just as a safety precaution, just a generally good idea. It's worth talking about. It used to be all the antifreeze pink stuff that you would find in the stores was made using a propylene glycol as a primary ingredient that doesn't freeze. Over the last several years, it's much transitioned over, so most of the stuff you find in the stores is using ethyl alcohol. Now, yeah, the same stuff you drink, but there's some in my beer. But if so when you're shopping for it, the reason I don't like the ethyl alcohol based stuff is it's alcohol, and alcohol evaporates, right? So you're pouring this into your P-traps, and then over the winter it's evaporating out, and then it starts letting smells come back into your camper from your tanks. No matter how clean you get them, there's always a smell in there, right? And so that's the biggest thing. I'm also not totally convinced that the alcohol is good for the seals that it'll be up against, especially like in the toilet. And I always leave a little bit in the bottom of the toilet, and a couple months later it's all evaporated away, so it doesn't keep the seals in the ball valve of the toilet moist and lubricated. How do you tell? So let's look at this guy. The biggest thing to look for is combustible, flammable, something like that, right? That's an alcohol-based unit. You'll notice there's nothing over here on this propylene glycol-based antifreeze that says anything about warning about flammable. This stuff doesn't burn. This stuff can, right? When you look at the ingredients, water, propylene glycol, dye, a couple other proprietary whatevers. And over here, if we can read it, we've got water, ethyl alcohol, a little some propylene glycol as well, and then the other stuff, right? I much prefer all propylene glycol. It's harder to find. When I find it, I'll buy a case and stash it in the garage, and it'll last me a couple of years. Oh, and don't go by the brand or anything. All the brands make it, many of the brands make it both an alcohol and propylene glycol based. So make your decision based on the ingredients and whether it's flammable, right? Flammable is a big warning. The propylene glycol, the pure ones, will never be flammable. So running back over here to our hot water heater, I'll go ahead and turn off the high pressure valve. I don't like leaving that open. I'm afraid it'll get stuck open. I don't know. And I also leave the anode rod out. Take a look at the anode rod here. This is in really good shape. It's got at least another season left on it, unless I run into some bad water somewhere in our travels. So yeah, good to go on this anode rod. I'll just leave it laying right there and put the cover back on, and off we go. I do get asked, how much antifreeze do I pour down each sink? I don't want to be wasteful. So my kitchen dual sink up above has a single P-trap. So both sinks run into this single P-trap. So all you're trying to do is fill that and displace the water that's in there right now. So really a couple of cups is enough. It just doesn't hold that much water. So I'm only trying to fill one. So I'll just pour a couple of cups down here, and we'll and there's the bottle now. That's enough. It'll be good to go through the freezes that come. Okay, we're going to do the same thing in the bathroom sink. P-trap's the same size, same amount of goop. That'll drain. And in the shower as well, I try not to get it all over the shower because it doesn't stain permanently. It just looks ugly. And I just got it all over the showers. And guys, that's it. This thing is ready to go to any cold temperature you could possibly want to send it to. Of course, we take the liquids out. Canned foods, anything that could freeze gets taken out, but the water system is prepped and ready to roll. And you know, there's debate out there. Some people are like, well, we need to pump the glycol or pump the antifreeze through all the lines. I did that for several years. do that if it makes you more comfortable. This is fine. The way we did this, we went, because we were so methodical about going through and starting here where the water and air come into the system, pushing it all the way back so it never has a chance to come back this way. There's no water in here to freeze, or at least not enough to freeze and cause damage. So I have zero concerns. I would take this up to the Arctic and not worry about it freezing the way it's set up right now. But if you want to, pump the glycol through. The reason I don't pump the glycol through is it's difficult, not difficult, but it stays in the lines. And so your first few trips of the year afterwards, it tastes, your water gets foamy. I just prefer to use air and do it that way. And then, of course, in the spring, I have other videos and information out there on how to sanitize and get everything ready to go in the spring. I usually do the sanitizing then, after the winter is over. We'll be using this guy again over Thanksgiving, so 3 or 4 weeks from now, and I'll go through this process again. What's interesting is it really only took me less than an hour to do this, and I'm filming, so normally I can knock this out in 20 minutes. It's super simple. It's so easy, why not just do it and play it safe? We're not supposed to freeze for the next week, but I don't trust it for 3 or 4 weeks. The weather's going to change, and I'd rather be prepared than not. And that's it, guys. I hope you found this useful. If you did, everybody tells you, like and subscribe. That helps me too. Helps me be able to keep creating these videos and doing these things to try to help everybody have a better and happier camping experience. Don't forget, check out fixyourcamper.com. That's where the community is, where we discuss all of these things that might need to be done. And there's some benefits in there. We have expanded from what's on our public website. We've got our RV information guide that's an ever-growing collection of information for you. We've got ways you can access the internet if you happen to be near me. You can piggyback off of my Wi-Fi setup. And if you're not familiar with that, look in the videos below or up in the posts and under internet, and you can see how I have my Wi-Fi working while I'm out on the road working. And so, yeah, like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it, and have a great day.